13 Reasons Why Season 2 had a lot going on, so let's break it down right here on What Happened. What's going on, you lovely people? Lisa here with another episode of What Happened, where I break down and recap episodes of TV shows, sometimes movies. This time it's all about Season 2 of 13 Reasons Why, and let's just say a lot happened, so brace yourselves. And thanks for being patient with me when it comes to this really long recap. It took me a long time to actually piece it together and finally film it. Now, if you want a shorter recap or to talk more about just the ending, I have videos dedicated to both of those. You can find links in the description below. That includes the super quick 5-minute recap of the show if you don't have time to sit through this really long-ass video. First, let's talk about how we left off with Season 1. We had Hannah's parents suing the school and Tony giving them the tapes. The kids started to do depositions. We had Sheri calling the police to report the stop sign incident, Tyler collecting a bunch of guns, Justin running away, and Alex attempting suicide and ending up in critical condition. Now with Season 2. Season 2 focuses on the trial and recovery of our characters for better or worse. Each episode is broken down into a different character testifying, minus the last episode, and with each testimony we learn a little bit more about Hannah we didn't know before. If you remember, Season 1 was about Hannah's truth and what she wanted people to see on her tapes. In this season, we get to see things about Hannah told from our other characters, which means she left things off her tapes, and let's just say Clay gets pretty angry when he learns some new stuff about her. Now let's talk about where we kind of pick up with our characters as we pick up 5 months after Hannah's suicide, and at school, no one's allowed to talk about Hannah's suicide, Alex's attempt, or any of that stuff. First, there was not going to be a trial. It was supposed to be settled. That ends up changing when the school's lawyers put the NDA back on the table and Mrs. Baker, or Olivia, as I'll call her, refuses to be silenced. So subpoenas go out to the kids and teachers, and let's just say this puts a lot of people on edge. We have Olivia and Andy, Hannah's parents, separated, and Andy has already moved on to another woman named Valerie who has a young daughter, and he's also working at the Wallplex. Olivia is trying to make ends meet, working at the drugstore with a new pharmacist and also going through the trial. By her side is a woman named Jackie, who is an advocate for victims of bullying who also lost a kid to suicide. She oftentimes oversteps her boundaries, which includes washing Hannah's blood out of the dress that Olivia wore that day that she had actually tucked away in a drawer and forgot about. Eventually, Jackie leaves after a girl named Sarah testifies. Sarah is from Hannah's old school and was bullied by Hannah and a few of her friends, which forced Sarah to drop out of school, and then because of all of that, Hannah and her family moved away, and that's how she ended up at Liberty. When Jackie finds out about the bullying, she packs up and leaves. As the trial goes on, Olivia ends up learning that Andy had an affair with Valerie, and Hannah actually knew about it. In fact, her poem, The Intruder, was about the affair, not the school like Olivia thought it was. Through Olivia's own testimony, we learn that her family has a history of mental illness. Now she's looking back thinking she could be to blame, and of course, the defense lawyer is painting blame on the victims and the parents as well. Ultimately, the Bakers lose the case against the school. A month later, though, Andy and Olivia finally hold a funeral and wake for Hannah. They find the church willing to hold it, and then we get a nice cameo from Anthony Rapp as the priest, which is a nod to kind of the Me Too movement, as he was the one who exposed Kevin Spacey. Anyway, Olivia is ready to move on now and live for Hannah, and so she's planning on living out some of Hannah's dreams since she didn't get to. She's packing up, selling Baker's drugs, and moving to New York. When it comes to the trial, there is someone out there trying to keep everyone quiet by sending threatening notes, vandalizing cars, and things like that. The majority of the people think it's Bryce, but is it? Now let's move over to Helmut, or Clay. Clay's been dating Skye and things are getting pretty serious. She takes him to get a semicolon tattoo for Hannah, but he kind of wimps out and passes out and ends up with a comma instead. They want to take their relationship to the next level, but their first try is brought to a halt when Clay realizes that Skye is still cutting herself and cuts herself down there. She's supposed to call him when she feels the urges to do that, but she hasn't been. He wants to help her because Clay tries his best to be a superhero, and she promises to call. When Clay returns home, he is told by his mom that the trial is back on and starts the next day. Clay's also mad because neither side are calling him as a witness, but he tells his mom everything's fine, of course. Everything's not fine, though, and this news has triggered his memories of Hannah to start again, and when he goes into his room, he actually sees Hannah outside his window. He continues to see her throughout the season, and some say she's a ghost, others say she's a part of his imagination. Either way, these conversations with Hannah drive Clay's anger and his quest to get justice for Hannah. But back to his relationship with Skye. The second time they attempt to get it on and go to the next level, Clay sees Hannah and stops. This confuses Skye, and now she starts to think something's wrong with her. Skye begins to question whether Clay really loves her or not, asking if his parents even know about her, and she still thinks he's hung up on Hannah, but Clay of course tries to say that he's not, but Hannah even gives her approval of Skye. Clay does say that Skye should come over for dinner sometime, so Skye takes it as an invitation to come over that night, and Clay comes home to find her cooking with his dad. Then we get an awkward dinner where we learn that Clay hasn't really told his parents much about Skye since they were kids, and she, well, tries to give him a hand job under the table. They end up going upstairs to try yet again to have sex, but he just can't get it up, so now Skye thinks even more that Clay is ashamed of her. They fight, and Skye says she just can't compete with Hannah, and she runs home. Clay goes after her, but it's unfortunately too late, and he sees her being put into an ambulance, and her mom says it's because Skye is sick. We learn that Skye went home and most likely cut herself, and it was too deep. Her intention was not actually to kill herself, but her cut just went too far. She makes sure to tell Clay none of this was his fault and she doesn't want to die, but she has a lot of feelings she can't control and other things. She says they both got to figure all their stuff out, and she breaks up with him, but Clay isn't really over it and leaves her a ton of messages throughout the season. Skye ends up going to a facility for a mental health program. Skye updates him and says that she's doing well now. She's been diagnosed as bipolar, she's figured out her meds, but she needs to start over and she needs to go live with her aunt and uncle. She wants to get better, and Clay is afraid that she's going to forget him. She says she can let him go and still love him. Those words actually come back in the finale and show that Clay has actually come full circle with his healing and learning process. Skye also tells Clay that he can help people, he just has to learn that the help they need is not always what he thinks it should be. Well, Clay doesn't always listen to that advice because, you know, stubborn Clay, and he can only focus really on one thing at a time, and that's getting justice for Hannah, and he doesn't care who he hurts in the process. As the season progresses and Clay goes to court, he learns things about Hannah, like I said, that often make him mad. He also receives some incriminating Polaroids from an anonymous source that show Hannah and Jessica weren't the only victims of Bryce. In fact, these Polaroids show years worth of questionable activity among the athletes at Liberty High, a rape culture. These Polaroids might just be their ticket to putting Bryce behind bars, but it takes Clay a while to focus on these Polaroids. He tries every other possibility to take down Bryce before trying to find out the meaning of these Polaroids and who sent them. And yes, unfortunately that means turning his pretty face into a punching bag again this season. After Jessica doesn't call out Bryce on the stand, and because he isn't on the witness list at the moment, Clay sets out to find the one person that can call out Bryce, and that is Justin. Thanks to a postcard in Jessica's room, he and Tony find Justin living on the streets in Oakland addicted to heroin. They bring him back to Clay's house and hide him there and do their best to detox Justin. Eventually, Clay is also called on to testify by Olivia in hopes that he can speak well for Hannah since he loved her. Instead, because of leaked texts I think his own mom gave to the defense lawyer, the discovery of a Molly drug-filled night with Jeff, his girlfriend Leah, Sheri, Alex, and Hannah is revealed. Clay then feels guilty because he remembers his and Hannah's talk, and she actually kind of discussed suicide in a sense, and he didn't pick up on it or do anything about it. Clay is now feeling even worse and more guilty. In his moment of blindness and rage, he releases the tapes online anonymously, not thinking about what it'll do to everyone on the tapes. Then Clay decides to finally pay attention to the Polaroids that have been sent to him and enlists Justin and Sheri to help him figure out the mystery. After finding Bryce's girlfriend Chloe on one of the Polaroids and trying to convince her to testify, she actually tells them where the clubhouse is, and Sheri gets the mission of going to get the code for the clubhouse. However, after the box of Polaroids are stolen, Clay feels like all hope is lost. He ends up in specialized skills, or more like alternative studies class, with Tyler and Tyler's punk friend Cyrus. Clay then ends up going out to have target practice with Tyler, and when they hear the cops come, and Clay runs off with Tyler's gun. Now, because of the events of the trial and the ghost or whatever of Hannah that has been driving him nuts, Clay snaps and shows up at Bryce's house with a gun wanting to shoot Bryce. Thankfully, Justin shows up in time and talks Clay down. And this whole Justin-Clay dynamic of from enemies to weird bromance is kind of one of my favorite relationships this season. Eventually, Clay starts to think about the people around him more and becomes more supportive. He's asked to speak at Hannah's funeral service, and it is therapeutic for him as he's able to express his feelings and let Hannah go. He even repeats the words that Skye told him, which is that you can love someone and still let them go. As Clay gives his speech and says goodbye to Hannah, we see the vision of Hannah at peace as she gets up and walks into the light. Clay gets a little more peace when he's talking to Olivia at the wake and she hands him something she found. It was Hannah's list of reasons why not, but unfortunately they didn't outnumber the reasons why. The list though shows that Hannah did have feelings for Clay, she just might not have expressed them. And she really did care for him, as he was two of the reasons on the list for why not. Clay also does end up finishing his tattoo of the semicolon, and we'll pick back up with him when I talk about Tyler. For Jessica, she has been out of school for a while and she's finally ready to return at the beginning of the season. It's been a long road for Jessica though, as she's still been sleeping in her parents' room on the floor since the end of season 1. Unfortunately, because Justin accused Bryce of rape then ran off and Jessica wasn't there to defend herself at school, Bryce was able to use his evil skills to spin the story and say that Jessica wanted it. Sadly, people believe those lies, and there are nasty things written about Jessica in the bathroom, calling her a drunk slut and things like that. Also, whoever is trying to keep everyone quiet keeps sending Jessica notes and even puts a blow-up doll and a noose on her front porch. The day she's supposed to testify though, Jessica finds pictures on the whiteboard in class of her drunk at the school dance asking who would believe a drunk slut. We end up learning that those pictures were actually posted by Chloe, not the person doing all the other notes, because Chloe thought she could scare Jessica into, protecting Bryce. Well, that damage is done, and Jessica does bring these pictures up at her testimony, and of course the awful defense lawyer starts victim blaming her, and basically Jessica ends up not calling out Bryce for her rape. When it comes to Jessica, she's mainly questioned about the hot or not list and her relationship with Alex and how that affected Hannah. We actually learned that what sparked Alex and Jessica's feelings for each other in the first place was a game of Never Have I Ever between the three of them, when Hannah talked about wanting to make her first kiss special. So as part of the game, Alex kisses Hannah, Jessica kisses Hannah, and then Alex kisses Jessica, and that's where they realize they have feelings for each other, and that drama starts. Of course, the lawyer uses this whole story to paint Hannah as a jealous girl. After her testimony, Jessica shows Mr. Porter the threatening note she got about keeping her mouth shut, and they all think it's Bryce, but Jessica still can't bring herself to call out Bryce. Unfortunately, that means that Mr. Porter can't really do much to help Jessica. Over the course of the season, Jessica and Alex end up rekindling their romance, and Jessica also makes friends with the school track star Nina, who's a sexual assault survivor as well. Nina seems to have everything together and has learned to not let what happened to her define her, and she takes Jessica to group. She even comforts Jessica when Jessica has a panic attack at the store, but that's when Jessica realizes Nina's way of coping is pretending that it never happened, and when it's time to get close to a guy or anybody, Nina ends up pushing them away. When it comes to the box of Polaroid pictures, it turns out Nina is on those Polaroids as well as Bryce's girlfriend Chloe. Since Jessica wasn't able to say Bryce's name on the stand, Clay, Jessica, and the group convince Chloe to testify against Bryce because Nina won't testify. Chloe is all for it until she gets on the stand and stares into awful Bryce's manipulative eyes and changes her testimony. Well, now the group is hoping to find the entire box of Polaroids in order to help Jessica and Hannah, and with the help of Sheri, they discover the so-called clubhouse. It's actually Zach who's been sending Clay the Polaroids, and he's so fed up with the baseball team and all of that, and the way they're defending Bryce, that it's his way of helping, but under the radar because he's kind of cowardly. Zach eventually, though, gives them the whole box of Polaroids, but unfortunately for them, they're stolen, so they can't use them with the trial. Who stole them? Nina's the one who ended up stealing them and burning them. Now, I get her taking her own picture and burning that, but why did she have to steal the whole box and ruin the chances for other girls to get their justice and have evidence? Well, with the Bakers losing the trial, the group stand with Jessica and support her. She then files criminal charges against Bryce. While Justin will go down for it, he's willing to because he loves Jessica and will take down Bryce. The judge ends up saying both Bryce and Jessica made bad decisions that night, and they should basically both think about what they did and make better choices and move on. So Bryce ends up with just a slap on the wrist with 3 months probation, while Justin ends up with 6 months. Yeah, this is supposed to anger you though, because this is sadly the reality of what happens in many cases. Look at Brock Turner and some of the others like it. Well, despite the outcome, Jessica does feel better and is ready to move on with her life and is even back to sleeping in her own bed. She's actually dating Alex now, and she's been pretty mad and trying to avoid Justin all season. But at the spring fling, it's obvious she still has feelings for Justin, and she ends up hooking up with him in the locker room at the dance. Next up, Mr. Porter is doing his best to make up for not helping Hannah in season 1 by being extra attentive. He knows his days at Liberty are numbered, so he's trying to make the most of them. Sometimes he ends up taking things too far, including slamming Bryce against the wall in the bathroom and going to Justin's house to find him and, well, getting in a fight with Seth. When Mr. Porter is called to testify to defend the school, he knows in good conscience he can't, and he ends up calling out Bryce. Now he's really on probation, and while he's not supposed to talk to any of the kids, he does take the time to talk to Justin when Justin finally returns to school. When Justin tries to say everything's fine and leave, Mr. Porter makes sure to stop Justin and keep talking to him, the thing he failed to do with Hannah. The fact that he let her go still haunts him. Ultimately, Mr. Porter is fired, but before he goes, he gives Principal Bolin a stack of files of around 11 high-risk kids at the school that need extra attention. Principal Bolin, though, is a douche and just throws those files aside. The top file on Porter's stack is for Tyler Down. Tony is another person who was called to testify on behalf of the school and not the Bakers. He's really been there for Mrs. Baker, but also he has major demons in his closet. He's so worried about testifying that he even burns the letter Hannah left him with the tape saying that he owed her one, as well as a journal entry that Ryan gives him. We end up learning that Tony got his second strike with the law when he and his brothers beat up that guy in season 1. Tony is worried about getting in trouble again because that would be his third strike and off to jail he'd go. Because of that second strike, though, Tony has been ordered to work on his anger management at a gym where he's taken up boxing. Tony has broken up with Brad, and he ends up forming a relationship with his trainer, Caleb. While on the stand, Tony unfortunately does lie to protect himself, saying that Hannah left no note and there's no reason Hannah would choose him for the tapes. After his testimony, though, he feels awful and tells Mrs. Baker what really happened. He says that Hannah trusted him with the tapes because he owed her one. She helped him ask out Ryan and everything, and during one of Ryan and Tony's dates, a guy harassed them and called him a homophobic slur, and since Tony has anger issues, he beat the the crap out of that guy, causing him to even lose one of his eyes. Hannah then hid Tony from the cops in the movie theater. Hannah ended up writing about that day in her journal, which is why Ryan stole that journal entry and gave it to Tony, which Tony burned. When the guy that Tony beat up happens to show up at the same gym Tony goes to for self-defense classes, it causes Tony to go into defensive mode even more and push Caleb away and get more paranoid. Thankfully, Caleb is good for Tony and won't let him push him away, and by the end of the season, the two seem to be going strong, with Caleb even showing up for the spring fling dance. Courtney and Ryan don't really have huge parts this season, but they both are called on to testify. Courtney is mainly questioned about the night of the photographs of her and Hannah kissing. She starts off acting like the Courtney from last season, but as the defense lawyer tries to paint the picture, making Hannah seem like the one hiding her sexuality and all this, it's just too much, and Courtney has had it and has to tell the truth, and she ends up saying that Hannah was actually covering for her. Now that Courtney is out, her dads actually take it really well too, and it doesn't seem like she has any backlash with being outed and coming out and problems at school. It seems like it turned out pretty well for her. We don't really see much of her again until the final episode. When Courtney does show up though after her testimony, it's because she's either trying to tell Marcus that he needs to come clean and tell the truth, or she's stopping the big ass group fight by pulling the fire alarm. Well, it's not shocking that Marcus is a really big prick and he's not going to end up telling the truth. He comes from a political family as his dad is running for office, and Marcus is supposed to go to Harvard, and the only thing he really worries about is himself, so this trial could really mess things up for him if the truth comes out. Well, to protect himself, Marcus decides to end up lying on the stand, or, well, commit perjury. He ends up lying about what happened with Hannah at the restaurant. Through flashbacks, we learn that Hannah wasn't actually even on Marcus's dollar Valentine list, but he asked her out because of a bet with Bryce. When he couldn't seal that deal, he of course got pissed and spread the rumors about Hannah. Well, what Marcus says on the stand is that he tried to hold Hannah's hand and she yelled at him, and he was hurt that he got rejected and vented to his friends, and people twisted those words. Marcus continues his lie on the stand, also adding that Hannah actually wanted Marcus to help set her up with Bryce, and that's the first mention of Bryce's name at the trial. Let's just say that Bryce is really pissed that his name was even brought up. Marcus, however, thinks he was saving Bryce's ass by planting a seed that Hannah actually wanted Bryce in an effort by making it seem like Hannah wanted Bryce. And of course, Marcus tries to continue his good guy act and how he's going to reach out to people and help and blah blah blah. And it's just like, go away, Marcus. Well, eventually Marcus starts to get more paranoid because Tyler and his friend Cyrus decide to start messing with the bullies, since after Tyler's testimony and the leak of the tapes, he's the only one really catching any flack from it. After hacking into Zach's iCloud, they find a video of Marcus in the clubhouse getting a lap dance. They then start to blackmail Marcus, and Marcus ends up having to wear a dress to school, which he ends up pulling off by wearing a cheerleading uniform to the pep rally. The two also get Marcus with a paint bomb. They continue to mess with Marcus, and Marcus eventually snaps, especially when Bryce won't help him out. During the dedication for the new baseball field, Marcus gets up and resigns from his group that he started called Enguyton, because he's obviously a hypocrite, and then he says he's been protecting a rapist like Bryce in front of everyone. But of course, it wasn't an effort to expose Bryce, it was still an effort to save himself, since the tapes are out and Bryce is doomed. After that speech, Marcus ends up suspended for a bit, but we don't really actually see him the rest of the season, so who knows what else happened to him. Next up, Sheri spent the time between season 1 and season 2 in juvie. She pops up every now and then and really tries to make things right with Clay. She helps Clay when it comes to Justin's detoxing, and even assists in finding the combination out for the lock on the clubhouse. That plan though ends up taking a turn when she tries to leave the clubhouse, but Bryce shows up and makes her go inside and ends up pushing Weed her away and takes a Polaroid of her with Scott and another player. Sheri definitely looks uncomfortable, and we don't know exactly what happened after that Polaroid was taken, but it was enough to be a traumatic situation for Sheri that she tells Clay peace out, and we don't see her the rest of the season, not even for that massive group hug at the spring fling dance. As for Alex, he survived his attempted suicide, and now everyone is being overprotective of him, especially his parents. Alex is ready to go back to school, mainly because Jessica's also returning to school, but also his parents aren't sure it's a good idea. Alex really wants to also testify, but that's going to be left up to his doctors. So what exactly happened to Alex's attempted suicide? Why did it not work? He ends up telling Tyler that it was a gun that he hadn't shot before, so it was heavier, and he did flinch, so the bullet went up and in and out of his skull and into the bathroom wall. Because of his injury, he's left with some gnarly head scars and damage to the left side of his body, so he has to walk with a cane and can't really use his left hand. He also can't remember anything a month before the incident, so he knows about the tapes but doesn't remember listening to them. Alex is determined to figure out what happened in that missing month because he really wants to testify, so he asks his mom if he left a note, and she reluctantly gives it to him. The note mentions how Alex could have stopped something, and that's really what he tries to figure out all season, what he could have stopped. In order to help his memory, he asks Tyler, who was there for him when he was in the hospital, to see the pictures that Tyler took of him. He then keeps asking Clay to give him the tapes to listen to, but Clay won't give them to him, and Alex just continues to get more pissed as everyone tries to protect him. Tyler isn't the only one who has really stepped up to help Alex. Zach has also taken it upon himself to help Alex with his recovery, helping him with the physical therapy and giving him rides to school and carrying his books. He also listens to Alex, who is getting more frustrated with his recovery because people are kind of treating him as if he's broken. Plus, he thinks he's broken because, well, his manhood also doesn't seem to be working. If you're wondering why you hear people shipping Alex and Zach, it's because there's a scene where the two actually have a big fight in the locker room, and the friction of their fight and rubbing against each other and whatever causes Alex to finally get a boner, discovering he's not as broken as he thought he was. Now, while I didn't pick up on that being anything romantic, especially since there's no real flirting or anything that happens after that whole scene, except, Zach helping Alex learn how to dance as a friend, people have interpreted that into being a romantic thing, and that's why people are sitting there shipping them. Anyway, in another attempt to jog his memory, Alex tags along the court with Tony and Clay. Eventually, through playing a video game and some other triggers, plus Clay finally giving him the tapes, Alex begins to piece together everything that's happened. And he remembers what he wanted to remember so badly. It's a memory of him telling Monty they could have stopped it. And what could they have stopped? It turns out that Alex felt guilt over not stopping Bryce from raping Hannah. He and Monty were inside playing video games that night and could hear the rape happening outside. Alex never got up from the couch, so he didn't know exactly what it was, that it was anything out of the ordinary, until he heard the tapes. But Monty did get up and look outside and saw what was going on and just decided to ignore it and keep playing video games. Unfortunately, Alex is not cleared to testify, so he and Clay team up to try to get justice in other ways. By the end of the season, he seems like he's doing a lot better. He starts working with Mrs. Baker. He feels like he can do more things because he actually stops Justin from dying of an overdose, kind of from choking on his own vomit by actually turning Justin over, a physical feat he thought he could never do. He's also gotten a new haircut, doesn't hide his scars, and he's dating Jessica. Not sure how he'll react when he finds out that Jessica cheated on him, but I guess that would be addressed in season 3 if there is one. As for Zach, he's still feeling guilty about everything with Hannah, so he's doing his best to be a good guy by overcompensating in a sense, helping Alex with his physical therapy and doing all these other things. There's a catch though. Zach is still on the baseball team and he also has that image to uphold, and he's not quite ready to let that go, so he ends up kind of being complicit in that behavior as well. And yeah, both sides are yelling at him for not being loyal. Zach tries to balance being on the team, but knowing what Bryce did eventually wears him down. It's Zach who is the one leaking the Polaroid pictures. Why? Well, we learned from Zach's testimony that he does his best to stay out of drama, and he learned early in life to not rock the boat. So he tries to play the middle ground, but sometimes that can be worse. Being a part of the baseball team, he felt the pressure to participate in the bullying and brag about sexual conquests, and he started doing it just to fit in, even if he didn't fully participate. Because of Zach's testimony, we learned that the summer before Hannah's death, Zach's dad actually died. He went to see a lot of movies that summer, and since Bryce was out of town, Zach spent more and more time at the theater just to talk to Hannah, and they ended up having a summer romance. In fact, they lost their virginities to each other, and it seemed like they actually had a relationship that could last. Zach even opened up to Hannah about how his mom acts like everything is fine when it comes to his dad, and she doesn't ever want to talk about feelings, and she even tells him that he's fine. And yeah, his mom avoids the conflict, so Zach has learned to also bottle things up to avoid conflict. When summer is almost over and Bryce returns to town, Zach basically freaks out and he doesn't want to tell anyone about his relationship with Hannah because he thinks he's actually protecting them both, but it feels like he's kind of embarrassed, so he breaks it off and makes Hannah feel more ashamed that he'd rather not tell people, that they had a thing, and now he says he'll feel ashamed for the rest of his life. It really did seem like Zach loved Hannah, and well, that's why Zach leaks those Polaroids, because he doesn't want to cause drama outright, and it's his cowardly way of trying to help. But eventually, he gets so fed up with everything in Bryce that he just hands Clay the Polaroids and is like, "Here, dummy, here's a box of evidence for you." Zach then continues to be a friend to Clay and Alex, and even helps Alex, like I said, learn how to dance for the spring fling. For Justin, like I said, he was living on the streets doing drugs. He ends up going to live with Clay and his parents and tries to get clean. Clay actually got Justin there by lying to him, saying that Jessica wanted to come back and testify, but Justin actually learns the truth that Jessica wants nothing to do with him, and it hurts him pretty hard. Eventually, Clay's parents discover that Justin's been living there when a person decides to break into the house and goes into Clay's room, and Justin scares him off, but then Clay's dad comes up thinking Justin's the intruder. Eventually, they let Justin stay with him, and he starts to become one of the family, which Clay actually doesn't seem to like. Eventually, Justin does feel unwanted and tries to go back home and tries to run away again, and he finds Seth's stash of money and tries to tell his mom to leave Seth and run away too, since she thinks that Seth is going to kill Justin and maybe even her when he finds out that Justin took his money. Justin is then about to run away again when Clay calls saying he needs him, and that's kind of what Justin needed to hear. So Justin returns and tries to help Clay solve the mystery of the Polaroids, and thankfully also stops Clay from trying to shoot Bryce. Justin even starts an all-out brawl with Bryce and everyone at the school that even finds Mr. Porter and Coach Rick going at it. Justin testifies, and we learn why he was friends with Bryce in the first place. It was because when Justin was new to the school, when they were little kids, he got made fun of for wearing the same thing over and over, not really having any money for lunch, and Bryce was the one kid to be nice to him. That's why Justin felt like he had to be loyal to Bryce. Justin ends up talking about that night also of Jessica's rape and calling out Bryce, but the defense paints Justin as an addict and someone who just runs away from his problem and not a credible witness. When Jessica decides to bring criminal charges against Bryce, Justin makes a statement to Deputy Standall, and Justin ends up getting 6 months probation. And well, since they can't find his mom, he ends up stuck in juvie a little longer. He ends up being released and is staying with Clay and his parents again, and that's when Clay and his family offer to adopt Justin, and Justin says yes. However, creepy Seth is lurking outside Monet's, keeping an eye on Justin, and we also see that Justin started shooting up heroin again, this time in his foot in order to hide the evidence and the marks. As for douchebag Bryce, he basically walks around like he's untouchable, and his parents don't help that situation either. His parents had kind of set him up with the best legal team, and everyone, including the baseball coach, seems to be protecting him. It's obvious he spends most of his time on his own, and his parents travel a lot, and everything that's happening is a wake-up call for his mom, who's the only one of the parents to start realizing that her son is a monster, while daddy just tries to protect Bryce. Bryce has a seemingly perfect relationship with his girlfriend, Chloe, who we learn at one point was even raped by Bryce. When Bryce gets on the stand, he of course makes up lies about Hannah, saying that after they met at Kat's party, that Hannah actually pursued him and that they had a fling together, even having sex and all this stuff. He says he was just too ashamed to admit to anyone he had a relationship with Hannah because of her reputation. Well, that's when a lot of people start calling BS, because they know Bryce would brag about any little relationship and any conquest he could get. Bryce even took Hannah to the clubhouse one day. Bryce says that Hannah tried to come on to him again, but he ended up saying he just wanted to be friends, and Hannah was really hurt, and that's why she made up these things about Bryce. Well, while that is what Bryce tells the court, we see in his flashbacks what really happened. He's the one who would go to the bridge all the time by himself as his getaway spot. He always wished his parents would actually show up for him, and he actually finds a friend in Hannah that he can talk to, so in the clubhouse he ends up spilling all these feelings to Hannah. He then tries to kiss Hannah, but Hannah is the one who says she only likes him as a friend and rejects him. Now we see these flashbacks while Bryce is remembering them as he's sitting alone in his chair drinking, and then he starts remembering raping Hannah, and that actually gives him a boner. So if you didn't think he was the worst, now you definitely can't look past him being the worst. However, Bryce ends up getting off with just 3 months probation, and he gets to transfer to a new school to start over as a junior and still play sports. Talk about unfair. Oh, and Chloe is still with him, unfortunately. And now she tells Jessica she is pregnant with his baby. And I guess that leads us to talk about Monty and Tyler. Tyler is the first one to testify, and he speaks out at the bullying at Liberty High. The defense lawyer tries to twist everything Tyler says into making him feel like he was responsible for his own bullying, and that Hannah actually liked having her pictures taken, so the pictures being leaked, yeah, that didn't mean anything. Now, in Tyler's testimony, he talks about when he got shooed away for taking photos for the yearbook by other girls, and they called him creepy, and it's new girl Hannah that said that he could actually take her picture. She then lets him do a photo shoot of her in the park, and Hannah was upset that day after her fight with her mom. Tyler ends up saying something wrong, and Hannah gets upset, leaving, and Tyler wants to try to make things right, so he prints out some of the best pictures of Hannah and goes to give them to her, and that's when he spots her with Clay. He gets shy and hides and ends up spying on Hannah. Tyler also reveals that in his spying with Hannah one day, he saw her taking sexy photos to send to someone on her phone, but he doesn't know who she sent them to. But he says that just because Hannah took sexy photos doesn't make her guilty, because one picture never tells the whole story. Well, after his testimony, the bullying just gets worse for Tyler because of the trouble Tyler's getting, and he ends up getting sent to a special skills class, basically more for at-risk kids, and here he meets some punk kid named Cyrus, and the two form an unlikely pair. We then see Tyler have a roller coaster of emotions throughout the season. He's friends with Alex to start, but then Zach kicks Tyler out of Alex's birthday party and tells him to leave Alex alone. Tyler and Cyrus bond together, and they want to get revenge on all the bullies, so they start blackmailing Marcus, and then they vandalize the new baseball field, burning rapists into it. Clay actually helps with that vandalism too. However, Tyler just keeps wanting to take things a step further and even says that we need to end them, but Cyrus just keeps brushing it off and keeps thinking of other ways to pull kiddish type pranks. Tyler ends up meeting Cyrus's sister Mackenzie and develops a crush, and it's a mutual thing actually. They go on a date at the movies, and when Tyler ends up with a surprise in his pants while making out, he's embarrassed and leaves at the theater claiming a family emergency. Things start to get awkward with Tyler and Cyrus from there on out. When Mackenzie wants to talk at the concert, Tyler gets embarrassed, and when Cyrus walks up, Tyler ends up yelling at Mackenzie. Then what actually happened at the movies ends up getting told all over school because Mackenzie confided in one friend who ended up sharing the news with pretty much everybody. Tyler and Cyrus end up having a falling out, but Tyler is determined to keep going, and he decides he's going to post the pictures of the two of them vandalizing the field on Facebook. That ends up getting them both in trouble, and Cyrus is even more pissed and gets suspended, while Tyler gets sent off to a camp for kids with behavioral problems. Meanwhile, it turns out that Alex figures out that Monty is the one behind all the threatening notes, and thanks to Scott's help, they find Monty hiding out from his abusive father. They think think that Monty stole the Polaroids, and Monty plays along like he did, but he just tricks Alex and gets away, taking the gun back that he had actually sent Alex to threaten him. Now, flash forward to a month after the trial. Monty is being questioned by Deputy Standall about all the threatening notes and all of that. Monty denies everything, saying he's never even touched the gun. Tyler's returned from his program and tells the new counselor that he's actually better now and has a grasp on things, and he knows that he's the one responsible for his own actions and how he responds to things. Tyler's really made progress. Unfortunately, though, he learns that Mackenzie started dating someone else, even though she actually seems like she still wants to be his friend. Cyrus is also glad that Tyler is doing well, but he doesn't want to be Tyler's friend anymore or hang out with him. Someone who isn't happy that Tyler is back is Monty. Because of everything that happened with the field and the trial and the baseball season being canceled, the athletes are not happy and blame everything on Tyler. When Monty tells Bryce that Tyler's back, he says they need to do something about it, but Bryce just doesn't care anymore. In fact, Bryce drops Monty because he says Monty almost messed up the whole trial, so they're done. Now Monty's even more pissed, and that's when we see Monty and some of the guys go into the bathroom and beat the daylights out of Tyler, bashing his head into a sink and then raping him and sodomizing him with a mop handle, leaving Tyler there. I don't know how Tyler actually manages to get home and cleaned up without anybody noticing, but that happens, and he just covers the cuts on his head with a beanie. From watching that scene, realistically, Tyler would have been knocked out for like a while and couldn't probably move for a few days after such a brutal attack. Anyway, the next day is April 20th, which just so happens to be the anniversary of the Columbine shooting. It also happens to be the day of the Spring Fling dance, and we see the majority of our characters healing and actually having a good time at this dance. That is until Hannah and Clay's song comes on and Clay is sat in the middle of the dance floor, but he ends up with a group hug from pretty much everyone, including Ryan and Courtney. While everyone's having fun at the dance, Tyler is at home and he's had enough, and he packs up all his guns and supplies and drives to the gym. He actually sent Mackenzie a text which alarms her, and she shows it to Cyrus, who then shows it to Clay, so they have a heads up that something bad's about to happen. I think Clay tells Justin to not call the police, but of course someone calls the police. Clay then goes outside and confronts Tyler head on. Probably not the smartest move, but he's lucky this is TV and it works out in his favor. Clay is able to talk Tyler down, saying things he probably wished he could have said to Hannah to save her. As sirens draw nearer, Clay ends up getting Tyler to lower his gun, and Tony drives up and Clay pushes Tyler into Tony's car. Clay's left outside holding one of Tyler's guns, as Jessica and Justin also stand outside with him, and they basically wonder what now, and the season ends. Wow, yeah, like I said, a lot went on that season. Sorry if I got tongue-tied, twisted, things. Yeah, it was just a lot, but I think I covered the majority of the major things that happened in the season. If I missed anything, I apologize. My brain is still trying to figure things out. Anyway, if you want to hear more about my thoughts on the actual things of this season, what happened, you can check out my review on the channel. But for now, I just kind of want to know your thoughts on this season. Which Hannah reveal shocked you the most? What did you like and not like about this season at all? And what did you think about this ending? How about Bryce getting off? And which issue do you hope draws more attention and discussion from viewers of the show? I got a dry throat now. I talked way too much in this video. I'm sorry if it put you to sleep or if you didn't care about it. But sound off in the comments. Let me know what you thought about it. I gotta go get some more water. You can find more 13 Reasons Why videos from me right over here. Subscribe if you like what you see. I'm Lisa. Thanks for watching.